Now, that's the significance of having this second F1, F2 column. So it shows that this is the first target, this is the second target. For pure vowels, which we did before, we obviously don't have a second target, but in this case we do. So we want to write, in our notes column, we want to write diphthong and second target, very short and hard to measure. Okay. And similarly, if we look at 691, have another diphthong.
Kasuai.
Now, this is this unstressed syllable we're talking about, so we don't have to worry about this short cus bit. But we have in this syllable, we have u, ah, and then the glide. We're not going to worry about the glide because we're treating it as a glide and not as a vowel, this bit here. So we have a going to a, more like somewhere here. Okay, so this is as well, this is very hard to measure, but we're going to make a good go of it. So we might use this token here because that's a bit nicer. So if we have a look here, I might just do it there. We get the first formant, get the second formant. That's obviously a high-ish, back-ish kind of vowel. And our second target is very hard to identify. If we get rid of the formants, we can see that this moves up level, and so our second target is probably around here, but it is very hard to tell. So just make your best judgment with it, and don't worry if it's hard to measure, because diphthongs are quite hard to measure sometimes, especially ones followed by this glide, which is like a vowel. So you probably won't have an easy time with these, but that's okay. So if we take that, that'll get the average kind of target for it. And get the second formant. Right, so now we have the values for the diphthongs. We're going to plot them on a separate vowel chart, and there's a few reasons for this, but we won't go into it now. We might go into it in the tutes or something, but just make sure you plot your diphthongs on a separate vowel chart. Okay, so our first diphthong goes from 362 29 24, which is roughly about there, to 822 and 1645, which is around something around there. Okay, and to signify the direction of the diphthong, we just do these little arrows, and it doesn't look kind of looks a bit crappy, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so our next diphthong goes from 513 963, which is around here, to 693 1435, which is around there. Okay, and again we just draw arrows to signify the direction of the diphthong. Now as you fill out your data, you're going to get some you'll see some patterns emerging, and you might get targets something like from here to here or here to here, and you know, they're not exactly the same as this one here, but they will be signifying the same targets. Okay, now the language that you are doing has a few more diphthongs than this language, so it won't be nice and pretty like something like this and something like this and something like this. Okay, but it shouldn't be too bad, I think. Okay, so what I've done is I've completed all of the 50 or so tokens and put them on to my vowel chart here, and this is, I guess, the hardest part of the assignment. The measuring of the formants can be a bit tricky, but it's not, you're not using analytical skills as much as you will be in this part of the assignment. So What we want to do now is circle significant clusters, or clusters which the speaker and the listener identify as certain targets. Now, they might not be realized purely phonetically as their actual targets, but they are significant in that the speaker and the listener can recognize that this, for example, is the same as this, and it's kind of indicative of a target up here. Okay, so the way you want to do this is, so we have our database over here, and we can match up our database with all these dots. So right away we can see some general kind of, there's a cluster there, I just move that up a bit. There's a lot down here that seem to be a similar kind of target. There's this one here, there's maybe this one here. These two might be a bit together, but we've got something over here. We've got a lot of ones here, and maybe another little cluster there. So that's not really enough. What I need to do is actually listen to the tokens by ear, which can be a little bit painful, but this is how phonemic analysis is done. So listening to the targets by ear and identifying them yourself as whether or not they are indeed the same target. And when you do it, it actually won't be as hard as you think. These will sound very similar, and these will sound different to these. These will sound different to these, and you should be able to get a broad idea of these targets. So I guess that's the hardest part of the assignment. Okay, so what I've actually done is I've done all that now. I've gone back through the tokens and listened to them and made up my own mind as to what these clusters are. And I've got some here which I'm not too sure about, but that would be something that I could discuss in my written part. But basically I think we have a high front vowel, maybe an E, one here which I would consider maybe an air, and then we have down here which I would consider an air, cardinal 3-ish, and we have a low central vowel which ranges between R and R. We have one here which is kind of like our open O, which is like or. We have one a bit higher and a bit further back like a O, and then we have a very high back vowel which is like a oo. We also have a high central vowel which is like a and we have these ones which are our central kind of ish vowel targets. So you can see that the difference between this and this without all the circles, it's a bit tricky to identify the clusters, but you actually have to go back and reconcile this with the data. So you have to actually go back, and it's a bit painstaking, but you have to actually go back and listen to these dots and decide for yourself whether you think they're the same group, or if that's a bigger group. And it's not too hard to do, because a lot of these vowels we have in English and we recognize them as different, and we have quite a good ear for these kind of vowels. And the vowels in your assignment won't be the same as this, but they should be fairly similar. Okay, so the last thing to do is to assign IPA values for each of these groups, these phonemes, and you would do that in your write-up and just give a brief explanation about why you've labeled it as that, but it should be quite easy at that point. Oh, and one more thing. I have open, these are my diphthongs for this data, so it was something like this. Now yours is going to be a little bit harder, a little bit more in detail, probably more tokens with diphthongs, but you should end up with something like this. And you can see that these are probably the same target, and when you listen to them they do sound like it's producing the same diphthong, and here, even though they're not the same at all. When you listen to it and when you look at it, they're very similar, and when you listen to it they are quite unambiguously the same target. Okay, so that's about it, I think. If you have any other questions, we're going to go through some stuff in the tute before it's due, just to answer any questions you have. But other than that, if you want to come and see us, just let us know, and good